Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I apologize that I couldn't be Rocco for you, and I hope you'll be able to cope. I did ask Glenn in advance what the mix in the room would be, and he said there's about 50% insurance people and about 50% that are academic or government. And I'm an optimistic person, so this gives me at least a 50% chance of saying something interesting. So thank you very much. I wanted to talk first about the experience of Slave Lake in the immediate aftermath. And you've heard a little bit about that. To give you some context, AMA is an insurer that is based in Edmonton, writes only in Alberta and in Manitoba, and has a relatively sizable market share within those markets. Personal lines only, and a fair number of claims in Slave Lake. So the first thing we did, and I think the most important thing we did, is we wanted to respond immediately. So at the evacuation centers, except for one, we were the first people there. And immediately what you're faced with is you're faced with people that have all kinds of questions. There is all kinds of misinformation. They have been told to gather whatever belongings they have and flee. And you have all kinds of different people, so they react quite differently in these scenarios. And the only thing that really spreads faster than wildfire is rumors in an evacuation center when people really have no information whatsoever. So our first effort was to get there first, to find all of our people, and whether they had a claim or not, we wanted to talk to them. Now the reality of that is when you walk into an evacuation center with hundreds and hundreds, thousands of people, they all have questions. They don't really care what insurance company you're part of. If you're the first one there, everybody's rushing to see what you know and try to get some questions answered. Because not just with an event like this, but in general, people don't pick up their homeowners policies, they don't read their policies, they really don't know how that policy is going to react, and they really don't know what they're going to do next. So to be there first and to be able to answer those questions was a very important thing. Very shortly thereafter, and my friend from State Farm mentioned this, we started to use social media as a way of managing that message as well. In our experience, the first thing we were doing was, we knew people were evacuated. In reality, they don't even know if they have a claim. They just had to leave. They don't know if their house is burned down. They don't know if it's partially burned down. They don't know if their neighborhood is burned down. They're hearing things from people sitting next to them that they really don't have any information either, but everybody's talking about it, obviously. But we know that everybody brought their cell phone. It's a very important device, so that's something that made it out when they had to leave. And so if they're using Facebook or Twitter and they're able to get a message from a reliable source that can tell them either where to be to get more information or to give them some tangible information about the situation, that spreads within the room to the people that didn't bring their cell phones. And suddenly they feel a little bit more comfortable because they do have a little bit more information. That really helped us as an insurance company to be able to develop those relationships right away. And my friends were here. I do understand the frustration and the communication, and it could have been better. Yes, it's true, but I think the message that we're relaying to policyholders when we see them for the first time in an evacuation center is all of that stress that they're feeling, all the lack of information they're feeling, give it to us. Let us be frustrated, because this is our opportunity to step up and really try to help them out. The delays in getting into the site itself and really understanding if you do have a claim or if you don't have a claim, that was probably reasonably necessary to secure the sites. But again, I do understand the frustration because people really want to know. The second thing I want to talk about was to give a little bit of contrast between this event and some other events that we've had. I've personally been in Alberta for 2 years, and over those 2 years we've had our fair share of catastrophic events. But to see the contrast in those two things is quite striking. So from the perspective of an insurer, if you have a catastrophic response plan, when you're responding to a very focused event like the wildfire in Slave Lake, in some respects it's actually easier. It gives you an opportunity to shine as an insurance company, because it was mentioned earlier, I mean, in terms of all the claims you have, this is relatively few claims. And so what you do is immediately you say, okay, you group of guys, you don't have claims anymore. We're taking everything off the plate. You only focus on doing these things. We're going to sit as a group of 10, 15, 20 people. Everybody's going to be on the same page. We know exactly what we're doing. You go here, you go here, you go to Westlock, you go to Athabasca, let's go. And you can respond very quickly. In contrast, the hailstorm we had in Calgary in 2010, well, that's 5,000 claims in a day. And to have that kind of coordination and to understand how you're going to respond is much more difficult when you have to basically engage every staff member you have and every external resource you have and make sure they're on the same page. So, and we don't talk about that too much because we have talked about the personal nature of fire, and in terms of individual severity, absolutely these are more of an emotional loss, much more emotional than I have hail damage to my car, although it's still drivable. But in reality, that hailstorm was a much bigger event for us in terms of the number of claims and the total cost of that loss. It was more expensive for us than the wildfire in Slave Lake. So that contrast is interesting. One of the other things that we were able to do that I thought was very powerful for us as an insurance company, and really was a lesson I learned from managing claims here in Ontario. So when the Sunrise Propane explosion happened here, we had the same mentality of we want to be the first ones there, so we're just going. But what we did was, and usually in a catastrophic situation, you're relying upon your more senior people with the skill set to be able to manage those things. But what we did is, okay, every senior and experienced person, you're paired up with our most junior person who's never seen anything like this. In fact, they've probably never been in the field at all. And they've been managing claims over the phone, but we want them to go with you. And we want them to go with you because it's very important for them to understand how insurance responds in a loss like this, to understand the emotional context of the person, that in the Sunrise situation, they don't know what's happened. In the wildfire situation, they're just looking for basic information that even a junior adjuster can relate to them. But they really get to see what it is that they do, and they understand the emotional impact on the individuals. So that worked really well for us. In terms of managing the losses moving forward, not to reiterate, it is an opportunity for insurers to test whether their methods of insuring to value are really working for them. And in this case, I would say certainly not. But then again, that's a little bit about calibrating the models as well as to how we measure value. So the services we use to calculate insurance to value, they would tell us that yes, they've calculated the value of a basement when you have to rip out the entire foundation. But I would suggest not, by looking at the actual outcome, and certainly not the cost of ripping out all the utilities to the road and so on. So it does give us some opportunity to produce a better product moving forward with those lessons learned. The other thing that I thought worked pretty well was some of the coordinated effort with the municipality and with the insurers to try to act as a group in terms of, rather than having 10 different companies trying to rip out foundations and demolish things, let's try to work together, and we'll just go house by house by house. Nobody's going to move along faster than anybody else, really. So let's try to coordinate that effort. And in as much as that effort is coordinated with the municipality, you're able to help coordinate the permits and so on and so forth as we move forward. There have been some other challenges along the way, of course, because for one, the wildfire was immediately followed by a lot of rain. Which really wreaked havoc on moving heavy equipment around to get this work done. So the demolition work didn't really proceed at the pace that we would have liked. And additionally, the damage that was caused to a lot of the civil infrastructure, it really does take precedence over the individual homeowner, because if you don't have the municipal infrastructure in place, having your house there is not really very useful. So that did delay things, and then for those of you who don't know, northern Alberta is pretty cold. So if you don't get the demolition done on a particular timeline, your rebuilding efforts basically are going to be delayed by the winter. So that's the stage that we're in. Luckily, we've had pretty warm weather, not as warm as here, through the winter this year. So hopefully, a lot of that rebuilding effort starts off a little bit earlier this spring. What else can I tell you? I think that there's an opportunity for us here, and we've explored it with a number of our policyholders. I was surprised actually. I thought that the occurrence of this type of loss, we would have a lot of people that their employment is no longer there, and this terrible event has occurred, and how are they going to respond psychologically? I think we've heard some questions about that. We expected that a lot of people would probably move to other communities, that they would choose to, their house is a total loss, they're just going to move elsewhere. But in reality, of all the claims we had, we only had one. We only had one person that decided they wanted to move elsewhere, and basically they were retired and wanted to move closer to their kids. Oddly, they were successful in selling their property, which it was this burnt out hole in the ground. But the community really responded to say, no, we want to rebuild, we're proud of our community, and we want to be part of that effort. And as an insurance company, what we've been doing is it's very much a custom situation. On every individual claim, everybody has different needs. But this is an opportunity for us with very little cost to rebuild homes to a fire smart standard, to really consider those things. And when you have a community that's had that experience, they're engaged and they're quite willing to listen to those things. Insurance generally is there to say, well, what you had before, that's what you get. But in reality, if you can talk to somebody about having, closed eave troughs or a different type of roof or a different type of siding, the marginal cost to us really isn't that much. And if they think they're doing the right thing to improve the defensibility of their home against future fires, I think it becomes a real satisfier. So it's a win for us, it's a win for them. It's no different than putting on roof shingles in Calgary to a different standard when we have to replace roofs, because it does seem there that we have to replace roofs every 5 years. But it was very interesting to see the community response. And additionally, the outlying communities, in terms of the support that they gave to the victims of that wildfire, I thought was very impressive, in terms of people donating all kinds of water, food, toiletries, clothing, appliances, you name it. More things were donated than they could possibly deal with. And it's interesting because it was such a large event. It was such a large-scale event that it really did capture the imagination of people that way. And the interesting thing is sometimes we have trouble engaging communities to respond to smaller events. So we talked, for example, about how much of that loss was insured in Slave Lake, and I think it was categorized as medium. But the thing is that we have other events where people aren't insured and they need that type of response. So even just very recently, we've had an apartment building in Fort McMurray and an apartment building in Edmonton proper burn, total loss. And in an apartment, a lot of people don't expect that there's any real physical risk to the building itself or to their contents because they're on the third floor up here. But in those situations, you've got 75% of the people that don't have any insurance whatsoever. and the ability for the community to respond, it wasn't quite as strong as for that large event like Slave Lake, where actually a fair proportion of that loss is in fact insured. So it's interesting how communities respond. But those are my comments, and I think there's going to be some opportunity for questions.
Well,